Welcome to another episode of Chat with Nat, the podcast where real conversations meet real life. I'm your host, Natalie Kime, an entrepreneur, financial professional, caregiver, and an advocate for living fully. This show dives into the stories and strategies that shape who we are and how we thrive. On this week's episode, we're talking about divorce and a better way through it. Divorce is one of the most emotionally and financially draining experiences that anyone can face. Trust me, I've been through it twice. But what if it didn't have to be? What if you could protect your peace and your pockets at the same time? Divorce does not have to destroy your finances, your family, or your future. This week's money tip is protecting your peace and your pockets. Divorce isn't just a legal decision. It's a financial one that can impact your wealth for decades. The average cost of a litigated divorce in the United States is between $15,000 and $30,000 per person, not including the lost time, therapy, or emotional stress that often comes along with divorce. Mediation or collaborative approaches can cost up to 80% less. I challenge you guys, if you're going through something like this, to create a post-divorce budget blueprint, tracking your income, child expenses, and future goals early to avoid emotional spending or financial surprises. I encourage you to build what I like to call a peace fund. Small weekly deposits for future self-care, therapy, or rebuilding post-divorce to ensure that you hang on to your confidence or you recover it as quickly as possible. Today's guest, Kim Korven, knows this journey deeply, not just from the legal side, but from the heart-centered human side. Kim Korven is a retired lawyer and mediator who helps parents navigate divorce calmly and fairly without relying on lawyers. Kim is a TEDx speaker and the creator of My Lawyer-Free Divorce. She equips moms with step-by-step scripts and child-centered tools that lower conflict, decrease cost, and anxiety so that families can move forward in peace. So if this, again, is something that you're facing, something that you're going through right now, Kim will share the information of how to contact her and get her information if you're interested in that My Lawyer-Free Divorce course. But today we're going to dive more into what Kim does, why she does it, and the importance of that work overall. So Kim, tell me a little bit. Let's start with your peaceful divorce story. Is that a good place to start?
It's a wonderful place to start, Natalie. Thank you.
You're welcome. And welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here today. I think this topic is so vital in today's world. And look, anytime we're facing conflict, if we can navigate it from maybe the heart center instead of what society tells us, or maybe what our brain is telling us as we're facing the stress, I think it is a good thing. And so I'm grateful to have you here to share this.
Well, and you know, the other interesting thing before I jump into my story is like over 40% of marriages end in divorce. And so when I looked at the statistics, the numbers for 2022, it was over 670,000 divorces granted in the United States. 670,000 divorces in 1 year. So even if the listeners are like, my marriage is good, I suspect you know someone who quietly is thinking about, should I stay? Should I go? I don't want to harm my kids. So it is very topical and can really save a lot of money. So I thank you for being here.
Yes, absolutely. And look, I mean, I'm a believer in happy ever after. I always have been. I've had this little romantic part of my brain, you know. But I've been through this, like I mentioned a couple times. It's a difficult process. And I like to think, I know for me specifically, and I think most people don't go into marriage with divorce as an option, but there are times that it is on the table for various reasons. And that's why I think this is so important. So, yes, let's jump into it.
So, I thought I was so wise. I waited till I was 33 to get married. And I thought, oh, yeah, this marriage is going to last forever. Now, I thought that even though when he proposed, my whole body was screaming, say no, like the alarm bells were flashing.
Mm.
And I mean, I lived so completely in my head then, because that's what lawyers do.
Yeah.
I thought he's going to cry. I don't know how to deal with it if he cries. Like, that's just, so then it's like, well, how bad could this be?
Mm.
So I said yes. So I share that so that it becomes clear that this wasn't, as much as I wanted to believe it was this happily ever after fairy tale, there were cracks in the foundation right from the start.
Yeah.
And even our compromised church was the Roman Catholic Church. So we had to do marriage prep, and we had to do the big questionnaire, and our results were compared. And then we met with the priest, and the priest said to us, "You two should not get married." And we thought, what does a priest know about marriage? Right? And so we got married. So there were these significant cracks. So not surprisingly, there were cracks, and I didn't want to see them for a long, long time. And it was not a healthy space for anyone.
Yeah.
I remember taking my son, his dad's allergic to cats, right? So we would go to the Humane Society to play with cats. And the one time my son, he's 6, he found this gray kitten, and he said, "Mom, can I bring this kitten home?" And I said, "Well, no, honey, Dad's allergic." And he looked at me with these big blue eyes and blonde hair, right? And he said, "Well, we can get a new dad."
Oh my goodness.
I
Trade the
thought
dad for the cat.
I thought he was, just being this cute kid. He was being serious.
Mm.
He did not want to live with his dad. And that was his way of telling me. And still, I didn't see it. And so I had this husband who had some anger issues at times and could be almost catatonic at other times, and 2 little kids. And I realized this is not going to get any better. And I had to figure out how to end it.
Mm.
And it was, and I remember I had worked on a child protection file, and my client had found a social worker to help her. And the social worker always said, children love their parents no matter what. And for whatever reason, that had stuck with me. And I was pretty confident that my kids would have this great relationship with me. And I wanted them to have the best relationship possible with their dad.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd also worked on files where the couple fought over spices. Files where dads would not pay alimony or child support. And so there was no way, I was really, really terrified of traditional divorce. And so somehow I was guided, I think, by God into how to approach it, and from that place of love.
Yeah.
Wanting my kids to have the best relationship possible with him guided me in that initial conversation with him. So it became I could hardly stand to look at this man.
Mm.
It was just yuck. But I led with one of my best memories from just the two of us. And I remember saying, we're not bringing out the best in each other anymore, and our kids deserve more from us.
Wow.
And so that is really, and then we stayed away from the legal process. But it was that initial conversation really shifted things. And people who knew both of us would say to me, "How did you do it, Kim?" I'm like anybody can do it. It's easy. Well, I really had no idea what I'd done.
Yeah. I appreciate that story, that that personal application of the work that you do. When we talked last week or whatever, and I just realized how important it was to have this conversation on the podcast. You'd mentioned that about, filling out that questionnaire and the priest telling you shouldn't get married. And I thought, man, that's so crazy. And it didn't dawn on me until after that my second husband, my son's father, I met in school. And the class that we were in, I was going through my divorce, and he was just a guy in my class that was in my study group. We weren't dating at this point or anything. He was a nice guy. And I remember we took these personality tests, and then my divorce gets finalized. We would hang out in a group with our study group quite a bit. And then we decided to hang out, go to lunch a couple times or whatever. And we kind of hit it off. And so I went right from one divorce. I tell people in one calendar year, my last name changed 3 times. I filed for divorce in January. My divorce was final in March, and I went back to my maiden name from my first divorce. We had no children. And then I got remarried December, just before Christmas that same year. So my last name changed 3 times. But I remember that we were taking a class during this time frame. And I think my divorce was final. We had started hanging out, and we did a personality test. And I can't remember if it was the Myers-Briggs or it was something similar to that. And after it was all over and done, we were comparing our results. And we were the least compatible pair of all of the different types. And I remember we both thought, that's crazy. Like, what is this? No. And that memory has not come back to me. I don't know, ever since my divorce, which was, 15, 16 years ago. And so just ironic that popped up after you had said that we had kind of a similar experience, and we laughed it off and thought it was crazy. And, if 2 people want to be together, then they can, and they'll figure it out and it'll be fine.
Exactly. And what was fun for me, because I hadn't thought of the priest or when he proposed for years. But then when I was thinking about ending the marriage, and I really wanted to blame him, and you have to understand, I was a lawyer. I really, really wanted to blame him.
Mm.
But then it's like, how can I blame him when I had the evidence that maybe this is not such a good thing to do?
Yeah. And
having said that, I don't regret the marriage, and I'm sure he doesn't either, because we ended up with 2 great kids. But it's this not trusting your instincts, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I think when we can own it, then you can be more creative in the solutions too, I think, right? That, oh yeah, my instincts were screaming, say no.
Mm.
And I thought I knew better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I shared with you a little bit my situation. We had this whirlwind romance. We were having so much fun together. And about a month before our wedding, the invitations had gone out. And my son's father had 2 little girls from a previous marriage. And I had just fallen in love with these 2 little girls. And so all the plans were in place, invitations out, and something crept in and said, Natalie, you shouldn't do this. And I thought, how am I going to tell all these people? How am I going to tell him? I'm going to break his heart. I love these 2 little girls. And I don't regret my marriage either, for the exact same reason you said. I would do it all over again for my son. And he is the greatest gift I've ever received in my entire life. And he would not be, even if I had married somebody else and had a son, he would not be who he is without the part of him that is his dad. And so, of course, it's so easy to see that this many years removed from the situation. And I would say I am not proud of the way I chose to handle my divorce or, leading up to this separation. I had voiced how I felt. He had voiced the desire to, and we'd gone to counseling for over a year, but voiced the desire to stay together. And that's not what I wanted. And so I did not handle that in a way that I'm proud of, choices I made and things that I did. Because here I was, even leading up to the divorce, it was so hard for me to have that conversation because I didn't want to hurt him. Like you said, I don't want to break his heart. So instead I stomped all over it. And, at the time where I was mentally and emotionally was not the most healthy place, and making any decisions during that time other than getting through the process, even if it wasn't what he wanted, was what I owed him. And I wish that's the one thing I wish I could have done better. But I did share with you too that the one thing I think that we got right in our divorce is I said to him the day that we separated and he decided, I'm in Texas, he decided to move back to Utah. And I said, this is no longer about you and I. This is about what's best for our son. And that, I think we both did the best of our ability through that process to stay focused on that. It wasn't easy. It wasn't always pleasant, but I think we did stay focused on that. But what you do is go multiple steps beyond that. So I think we did okay in our divorce, but it certainly could have been better, especially after talking to you. So let me ask the next question is, why are most divorces so ugly and expensive?
So the whole model of divorce is 19th century. And divorce, like it used to be a private member's bill. So, and the government passing legislation to say your marriage is over. And it was moved into the civil court system, which is designed for property and contracts where there is not a big emotional stake.
Yeah.
And that whole process is adversarial. Right? So you never ever, like if you and I were in a car accident and you end up with whiplash and you sue me, I'm not going to admit, like you're not going to admit in your claim that you were texting.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to admit that I was you just blame the other person.
Right.
And a judge decides, well, that's fine if it's you and me in a car accident. But this is somebody you loved.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, like in Amanda Ripley's book, High Conflict, one of the factors that has to be present for a dispute to go high conflict is humiliation. One of the people feels humiliated. So you get served at work by a stranger with this court form saying your marriage is over, and the language is very adversarial and 19th century. You feel humiliated.
Yeah.
And things spiral downward very, very quickly. Because it's most people objectively, like I've talked to people who've said, yeah, we were getting along really well when we worked with a mediator, but then when we ended up with attorneys, it all went sideways. But it's how the game is played and the language just fosters division, right? You cannot say, oh, well, he's a better parent than me in that he has more structure, because, that might be used against me.
Yeah.
Whereas if you could say that, you can keep things much calmer.
Do you think that, so first of all, let me speak to the, being served in an environment with other people around, whether it's at work or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating, especially if it's a situation that you didn't know was coming, right? Which happens so often. And yet most people in that situation, hindsight later, they're like, oh, there were so many signs. But in that instance, you're right. There's that defensive posture comes out of, first of all, what are all these people thinking? Because unfortunately, that our brains, especially as women, I will say, instantly think, what do all these people think? And then maybe you come from a place of, I have to defend myself because now they've seen this. I have to explain where this is coming from or how they're the bad guy or whatever the situation is. But on top of that, where the situation may be a blindside or whatever, there is that emotion there. And you talked about how it's so 19th century. The language is fixed for contracts. It's that word right there, where there is no room for emotion. It's black or it's white. There's no gray in between. It gives you this or it gives you that, or it says you had to do this or you had to do that, whatever it was. And so it's a transaction. But I think what you said that was so important in that was there was love there. There was even in your situation where there was a part of you screaming, no, don't say yes. And for me, man, are you sure you want to go through with this thing? There was still love there. There was a connection there. And that process separates those two things. Almost does not, in my opinion, I will say, allow room for the emotion of it. Because I guess maybe I don't really know why. Other than, like you said, the language is contractual. And so I'm trying to figure out I'm just going to throw it out this way. How do you bring that back in? So you came from the lawyer side, the mediation side, where you're sitting in those high conflict conversations. How do you navigate from that high conflict into a place of getting people to allow the emotion to come back in to forge a better path?
So it's interesting. I talked about the legalities and how the legal system portrays divorce.
Yeah.
And part of why there's no room for emotion is it's all very heady. It's very intellectual. And you have this independent, impartial decision maker who takes in all the information and decides what's true, what's more believable, and what's not. Very heady, right?
Yeah.
Rational. And what's interesting, though, of course, when you stop and realize that government usually isn't proactive, governments usually don't go, oh, we see this potential issue on the horizon, we better pass legislation for it.
Yeah.
Most often, what happens is government passes legislation in response to an issue coming up.
Yeah, reactively.
Uh-huh. So marriages were ending before government passed any rules about marriage, about how to handle it. It was actually this family, not a transaction, a transition.
Yeah.
Right? And when you think about other big family transitions or life transitions, right? Like when you got engaged that second time, the whirlwind romance, did you go and buy your marriage license right away?
No.
So you did not deal with the legalities right away.
Correct.
And how did you celebrate your marriage?
How did we celebrate
the marriage, right? Like, was there a big celebration?
Oh, yeah. You have the big wedding, the big party, the big cake, the big dress.
They're all rituals around that transition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when your son was born, was he Was there a big celebration when he was
Yeah.
baptized?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Ritual. And when somebody dies, people don't run to the attorney right away and files letters of probate. There's a ritual around honoring that person so that people can process the transition,
Yeah.
to ground it. So what I do is I have reintroduced ritual into divorce.
Mm.
And often, and there is one, yeah, I mean, I sell a ritual now that I created just with yarn. Simple little. It's simple and it's really profound because I think part of what keeps people stuck is there is no ritual with divorce.
Mm.
So you're just like, how do we process these emotions? The interesting thing, if you ask most people, like, so where I live, the first female real estate broker in North America lived here.
Okay.
Okay. So really an interesting lady. And I asked her one time, had a great life. And I asked her one time when she was 91, Fran, what's your best memory?
Mm.
And she thought for a bit and she said, the birth of my first child. And I thought, if Fran thinks it's the birth of your first child, then there's something to it, right?
Yeah.
And even about me with my goal about wanting my kids to have the best relationship possible with their dad. What happens is I start the dialogue around the kids. So it reintroduces some trust,
Yeah.
right? Because parents will always love their kids too.
Absolutely.
And when you phrase the discussion, so there's a ritual around, because the ritual, it's almost like building a eulogy, but some of the best memories are the kids.
Yeah.
So they feed into each other really beautifully to people being able to have a conversation that's very, very different. And one, in a sense, that's much more honest. Like, I've never forgotten the couple who I did mediation with. They had 3 kids, and I go through this process. And at the end of it, he says, wow, together we only have 5 good memories, and 3 of them are the birth of our children. I
Mm.
guess we're on the right path here, divorcing,
Yeah.
right? It grounded it, the discussion, just so beautifully. And it honors the love, right? Like, love is there,
Yeah.
and it is a transition. And when you accept, well, the kids are always going to love him and they're always going to love me. Okay. Right? Like, even
Yeah.
when my daughter was 10 and was telling me she didn't want to go to her dad's because he always fed them macaroni and cheese on Tuesdays and they always made pizzas on Fridays. And it was just boring, Mom. It was just so boring. So we had quite the discussion. And she was 10. I did not take what she was saying. I took it seriously,
Mm-hmm.
but I ended up saying to her, look, you're being exposed. Like, yes, you always have macaroni and cheese on Tuesday nights, but with me, we could eat anytime between 5 and 9, and it could be a bowl of cereal. Like, you're
Mm.
exposed to 2 very different ways of being. And that is such an important skill for an adult. And let's face it, you don't like everything I do,
Mm-hmm.
and you love me, right? And so I know, right? So you don't have to like everything your dad does, and you love him. He's your dad. You need to have a relationship. You go.
Yeah.
Well, and now she's 20, and her dad is the one who will bring her a meal when she's working. She's, Mom, Dad stopped by, and he brought me food. You never do that. And I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah, that's beautiful though, because I've got to imagine that, I mean, and I can only speak to the mother's bond to a child and to a son. And being a daughter, the bond I've always had in that connection with my dad, that when you can tap into that, I don't know what you call it, that heart center of that connection you have with your child that will always be there. If you can tap into that, it can calm some of the noise, or maybe what society says it should look like, or other people's expectations, or the fact that you were blindsided and this is not what you want when it's very much what the other person wants, because that can often be the situation. But it can ground you, like you said, or root you in, look, we created a family unit. And while we as a couple are moving forward to live our lives apart and no longer be married, that family unit still exists. And so, how do we best support that for the children? And it can bring the temperature down, maybe in other areas.
And it's interesting because, like, in the end, when my former father-in-law passed away, and the good Ukrainian Catholic, not believing in divorce, he mentioned me in his obituary as the mother of his grandkids. And that said to me, oh, this has actually really been successful. But the thing is, I'm not kumbaya. And even when we split up, and I said to my husband, like, I had the plan. And I'm like, look, child support, here's what you have to pay based on your income. And the mortgage, property taxes, they're coming out of your bank account anyway. So let's just keep you paying those. Kids and I will stay in the house. And there was cash difference of a couple $100 a month. You just pay me the difference. He would never pay me the difference. He'd leave the money by the back door. And I would be so furious and feel just like, what? He can't even give me the money. Like, I had no empathy for him at all. It was, right? I would have shattered had I had any empathy for him. However, I never raised that, right? Like, I'd just be like, Kim, doesn't have to be the way you want it to be. Like, keep your eye on the prize. And even years after we separated, and he was on the parents' music committee at the high school, I was running late for a concert, right? I know he's on the committee, so I texted him, and because there'd be no seats if you got there right when the concert started. So I'm like, hey, can you save a seat for me beside you? Because I'm not going to get there right till when it starts. And he's like, oh, yeah. So I get there 3 minutes before the concert starts. And I said, okay, hey, because he's out front. Where are we sitting? And he's like, no, you are not sitting with me. He said, Stacy, when Stacy came, I asked her to save a seat for you.
Yeah.
Now, I could have chosen, Stacy being a mutual friend, I could have chosen to be angry. Oh, he said he'd save a seat for me beside him, and he didn't. But I'm like, and part of me went, this is just so us, right? And
Yeah.
I'm far happier sitting beside Stacy anyway. This is great.
Yeah. And I think, gosh, that's such an important point, Kim, because in those situations, especially when they are contentious or continue to be contentious afterwards, the truth is, if I think back to my situations and the times and the ways that I would get frustrated, because I am 100% a type A personality, must be in control of everything. And that's not how the world works. When there's more than one person involved, it is not always a single person's way 100% of the time. And I look back and I'm like, how many of those things actually mattered? And there were times I recognized that in the moment and I could be like, you know, this is not when I'm going to fall on the sword. This is not my time to fall on the sword. I'm going to take one for the team here, or it's just not worth it. It's just not worth getting that worked up. And it's easy to see that in hindsight. It's easy to recognize the areas I got that right. It's also easy to recognize the areas I got that wrong. And I think that, look, if you're navigating through something incredibly contentious, the times that you get that right are probably minimal.
Well, and what happens if you're engaged in the legal system, you're much more likely everything is going to be a big deal.
Yeah. I know. I want you to share a little bit about this, if you would. When we were talking last week, you shared a story with me, and I can't remember if you were representing the client or you were mediating between two clients, and one of them had their attorney there, and it was very contentious and all this. And then you kind of called an audible to kind of break that tension.
Oh, yes. So it was,
which one I'm talking about?
Yes. So it was, so yeah, I was still an attorney.
Okay.
And a family law client. And we went to another lawyer's office to have a 4-way settlement discussion. So, and my client at first was, why are we going to the other lawyers? Why not at your office? And I'm like, look, you actually have more money in this situation. Let's let them feel a sense of power.
Mm.
So we get there, and the other lawyer, it's like a discovery, peppering my client with questions. And I'm like, and I look, and I look around and I see a flip chart pad of paper. And I'm like, oh, excuse me. I just, I think it would be really great to record the key points of our discussion, don't you? He's like, oh, yeah. Well, I noticed there's a flip chart pad of paper here, but I haven't been able to see a flip chart stand. And I think it would be really useful to use it to record the key points. Do you think maybe, you could find us a stand? So the other attorney, he got up, he went, found a flip chart stand, and it completely derailed his game plan.
Yeah.
So he came back and we had a great settlement discussion.
Yeah. It's just kind of breaking that tension in that situation, or, that battering your client with questions to take a pause for a moment.
And it's figuring out how to come at it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't end up fulfilling Einstein's definition of insanity.
Yeah. Tell us what that is.
Well, that's doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result.
Exactly.
So that was a fun one, actually.
Yeah. You know what? Oh, go ahead.
No, because at first I'm like, oh my Lord, like what? Like this, it was not what I pictured at all. And it's like, how do we get this back on track?
Yeah. I think about, as a single mom, you tend to have a lot of friends that are single moms also. And you kind of, if your kids play sports or are in the band or whatever activities they do when they're little, you kind of notice those single moms that are there, and you get to know one another and build these relationships. And so, especially when I have tons of single mom friends, and I don't think it's just because of that, but when my son was little, I connected with a lot more other single moms with kids the same age going through the same thing. But one of the things I feel like I've noticed, I don't know if I want to say in society, I don't know how to word it, but what I've noticed is for those friends of mine who seem to be navigating divorce in a healthy way, in a somewhat positive or more peaceful way than others, there's almost a judgment against that they're doing it right by keeping it more peaceful instead of going for the jugular, so to speak, versus people saying, why is it so contentious? Why are you so focused on high conflict? And yes, there are all kinds of hurts and all kinds of things that could go on that can cause a divorce. I'm not diminishing that. That's not our intent at all in this conversation. But even in those situations, there can be a healthier, more positive way to go about it, especially when there's a family unit, there's children involved. But did you see that from your side, both as the attorney, the mediator, and with what you do now, that there's almost this negative sense or this negative connotation to divorcing well versus divorcing ugly?
I mean, I've had some mediation clients say to me, well, the hardest part were my family and friends, because they were like, why are you doing it this way?
Yeah.
Right? Why are you doing it this way? And your question is very interesting for me, because at the time when I asked my husband to leave, my parents weren't the most supportive of me. Like, they had encouraged me to end my relationship. But then when I did, there wasn't a lot of support there. And I'm wondering, like, your question has me thinking, oh, maybe they were expecting a different playbook.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That they could have understood that more clearly.
Well, let's be honest. When you go through a divorce, usually what happens is many other relationships sever. There are friends that in my case, I'll say there are friends that my husband kept. There are friends that came my way. Of course, family is family. Now, I do have good relationships still with my former in-laws. They're amazing grandparents to my son. They've been supportive of me and always checked in on me as well as him. And so I think the fact that it's like they've got to choose. People who are connected to a couple that divorces, it's like, oh, well, I need to take a side, because that's how these things work. You take a side in these situations. So which side am I going to take? And if there's conflict or blame that this person got it the most wrong, because there are two people involved, there are always things both people could have done differently, better, more of, less of, whatever, right? There are two people involved. But they're looking for who's the most wrong. So it's easy for me to make my choice of where I'm taking a stand in this friendship or whatever. And I imagine, and maybe this is what it was for your parents, the playbook didn't go that way. It wasn't the playbook they expected to see. So people are like, well, how do I make a choice then? How do I make a choice of which direction or who I'm going to support or which side of this equation I'm going to stand on, when there's not a clear side, because they're working through it as a team, even though they're ending their marriage. And I know I have a good friend that went through a divorce last year, and I told both people I love and care about them both. I don't understand it all. It's not mine to understand. It wasn't my marriage. And I told them both, I am going to be here to support the other. However, you need to know I'm here for you as a friend, but both of you will know that I'm talking to both of you. Like, I don't want to be the confidant that you think you can say all the things about the other to me, and it's not going to get. That was my way of keeping it, where when I talked to him, the other would know, and they never questioned that I knew stuff they didn't know or that I was taking. Look, I'm your friend. And I would check in with them. How are you doing? I don't want to know the details of whatever you're doing. How are you doing? And I think that's difficult for people who expect it to be one way, and it's not that way, to the extreme opposite side of things, to figure out how how to handle that. And maybe you're right. Maybe that's where that comes from. And I don't know if judgment was necessarily the right word that I used. That's kind of a strong word, but there's opinions. People have opinions on how it should be or how you should be handling it or which scenarios you should be standing on and which ones you shouldn't. But I even had a conversation recently with one of the people in this couple. They're divorced now. They have been for quite a while, almost a year, but they had a little conflict recently. And one of them reached out to me and I said, I hear your part. And I can tell you that I understand the other side of that as well. But let me just ask you one question. Referencing back to when I said before, is this something I'm going to choose to fall on the sword over?
Mm-hmm.
I said, is this your fall on the sword moment? Is it big enough to be a fall on the sword moment for all the other areas that could escalate things? Or is it worth just letting go and realizing it's not ideal for you, but it works for the kids? And they were like, I don't know. And the next day I got a text that said, I thought about what you said. And you're right. And that wasn't my point to be right. It was just me saying, gosh, of all the things that you could get worked up about in a divorce situation, even after the divorce, when you're dealing with things with the kids, that's the one you're going to pick.
But see, but that's what happens when you don't have a ritual to clear it. And I used to say to myself, like, I used to get furious in 0.5 seconds whenever he'd say anything.
Yeah.
First 8 years, I was always, Kim, there's a reason you're not together. Just let it go. Let it go, Kim.
Yeah.
Let it go. That was my mantra.
Yeah.
And even to the point, my second husband, right? I'd be ranting about something and he's, Kim, what is it you always tell yourself, don't you?
And you're like, ah.
I was, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I think that's so important though. And I think, we addressed kind of the next question I had is why isn't divorce a legal issue? I think you really went into that well. But let me ask you this as we're kind of working towards winding things down. What are 3 things any person can do to make a divorce process more peaceful?
I think the first thing is to have the conversation with, I use former spouse, not ex, with former spouse or your soon to be former spouse, that you're going to do this all in a way that is best for them. You're going to take your egos out of it. Like even I talked to one woman and she and her former spouse, every time they sat down to talk about what they were going to do, there was a picture of the kids on the table. Right? To keep that.
Wow.
Yeah, to keep that front and center.
That's beautiful.
Right? But to get that commitment. And I think, if you can realize your spouse is just acting the way they are because that's who this person is. They're not going to change.
Yeah. That right there.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't start with a divorce petition. That will just make it all ugly. What's interesting with that first conversation with your spouse, if you can say something that you acknowledge that you really appreciate about them or a really good memory, you're much more likely to have a peaceful result. Because there you are in conflict and things aren't going well, and you're saying, you're really good at this, or, like when we were dating, we went cross-country skiing, or and it was so, like, it was just such a great time, or we had Christmas with your extended family, right? And I just felt so included because they're not going to feel rejected or humiliated, and they're going to be more inclined to be on the same page, right?
Yeah.
But leading with a petition, that is absolute poison. And I'm going to stick in one more, and it goes back to what you
Please.
started with, and that is set a budget. What do you want to spend? Like I used to say when I practiced late in my legal career doing family law, I would ask my clients, do you want to pay a lawyer? Do you want to pay me, or do you want to have money for your kids?
Yeah.
And for some strange reason, they always chose their kids. They didn't.
Yeah.
But even to ask that kind of question is a really great reality check.
Yeah.
And what happens when people get on the same page regarding their kids, they actually want to be fair. It's a really beautiful thing
That is beautiful.
because that love for their kids is bigger than the dispute between them.
I like that. I'm going to ask you one more question as I thought of as you were jumping into the answer on my last question. And that is, what advice would you give to the person who is trying to do exactly what you've talked about? Maybe even saying, oh my gosh, I want to reach out to Kim. I want to get this course she has. To enhance what we're trying to do, peacefully divorce. But
So,
then they one-on-one are there, right? Like we're going to do this the best way we can.
mhm.
Then they go back to their families or the friends who are saying you shouldn't be doing that, or you should go for everything you can get, or you should nail them to a wall, or whatever all the sayings are people might use. What would your advice be to somebody who is trying to do that, but getting so much from the outside world in navigating that process and staying on track with what they truly want in the situation?
Well, it's interesting because I think why all the pushback gets listened to
Mm,
is because when you're separating, you feel like a complete failure. Like you cannot trust your own instincts,
mm,
right? And it's such a demoralizing, horrible place to be. But the reality is, nobody knows your kids
mm,
as well as you. And if your heart is saying, this is the best approach, right? And and the reality is, like when I did research for my TEDx talk, and I learned then that, oh, there'd actually been conflict in my home. I just thought passive aggressive behavior and silent treatment were tension. I'm like,
yeah.
this is conflict. But the reality is, for the kids with behavioral and academic issues, half of the behavioral and academic issues experienced by kids of divorced parents, they started showing, experiencing those issues 4 to 12 years before the parents stopped living together,
Mm,
right? So it really speaks to the impact of conflict on kids, how harmful it can be. So if you divorce peacefully, you're getting your kids out of that space.
yeah.
And I think if somebody's really questioning it, to look up my name and TEDx Regina, because my TEDx talk is on, can divorce foster resilience in children?
Mm,
My son gave me permission to share his story. And it's a real powerful story of resilience and positive change. Now, he says, Mom, I don't think how I turned out had anything to do with your divorce. He told me that, but he still
yeah.
gave me permission. Um, because I think it's when we're feeling really fragile, like we can't believe in ourselves. It's having the examples.
Mm-hmm.
Go, oh yeah, my instincts, my heart, I'm going to follow my heart here.
Yeah.
Right. And and it might be saying to people, I'm so glad you love me. And I really love my kids. And so can you just support me in this decision right now? Like, if it doesn't go,
Yes.
we'll know right away. And then we can, like, the thing is, it's really hard to issue the petition and serve the person and then have it go peaceful really well.
Yeah.
It's far easier to start the process peacefully. And if things don't work out, then lawyer up.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way you said that, though. Thank them for loving you, for caring about you, for being concerned or focused on things going the best possible way for you. But then remind them, this is the decision we've made and how to handle this because it's what we feel is best for our kids. And I would love if you could just support me in that. And if that doesn't work out, we'll do what we need to do. But I do appreciate your love and support for me. And I just ask that, you give me that in the direction that I've decided to go here. I think in any situation, that's the best thing you could ask for from somebody that cares for you and wants the best for you.
Well, let's say you end up, instead of spending the 30,000 each, you spend 5,000 each.
Mm-hmm.
Who benefits?
I would say everybody, but especially the kids.
Because the thing about family and friends sitting, like, so I used to own a 1975 Mercedes-Benz 240D, and it was 21 years old when I bought it, and it had been rolled, and it still had belts on it from the 1970s, like
Wow.
really low, and it was yellow, and I called it Cecil, and this big old tank, diesel Mercedes, yellow. And what was interesting about Cecil was every time I would drive Cecil for a while, there would be huge mechanical bills.
Mm.
And when it came time, and sometimes my parents had Cecil, my dad liked driving Cecil, and my current husband, he liked driving Cecil. But Cecil was getting wildly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to sell Cecil. Like, I didn't have wasn't going to spend $2,000 on a master cylinder for a car I drove 3 weeks of a year and then would have to spend another 2,000. Like, the math no longer made sense.
Right.
My dad and my husband were, "Oh, Cecil's a great car. You should keep it." And I'm like, "Look, that's easy for you to say because you don't have to pay the repair bills. I do. Cecil has got to go."
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing with family and friends, encouraging you to fight in divorce. Like in Canada, the average cost 2017 for a high conflict divorce was $54,000 a person.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so if you get, like, you're going to save yourself a lot of money. And doing it peacefully does not mean just giving in and doing what the other person wants. No.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Peace is an active verb. And there are some things, like, I will encourage people, because we'll do the analysis, my clients and I, on what it's going to cost you. Like, how are you going, if you go to court, what's going to happen? What's most likely to happen? And what are the legal bills going to be? So if what you're considering accepting is way far outside what you could do at court, is way worse than you can do at court, go to court.
Yeah.
Right? Even factoring in the legal bills. But if what's on the table, even if it's like 10, 15,000 outside of what you could do at court, grab it and run. Right? Because you're not going to have the time, the emotional, like, it's going to be done. And so this is the thing with the people who are egging you on to go to court. They're not paying the bill.
Yeah.
So thank you for loving me. And please respect that, I think, rebuilding my life, if I have an extra $15,000 or $20,000 at the end of it, would you agree that that would help me get reestablished? Because that's the amount I could save by doing this peacefully.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just a different perspective, helping people to see it through a different lens. And a lot of times they don't come from a place of necessarily understanding. They haven't been through it themselves. But I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up the episode. I think we could deep dive into divorce forever. There's a million other questions I could ask, but my guess is that those things exist in the course that you created. And so, Kim, before we wrap this up, I want to say, is there any last thing you want to share that we haven't touched on? And then also, how can people find you, get access to the course, connect with you for whatever questions or maybe guidance or assistance they may be looking for from somebody that does what you do?
So the first thing, I just want to stress, if I could divorce peacefully, so can you. I used to be a bloodthirsty little savage who loved to fight. Right?
Yeah.
So bear that in mind. And if you need the positive example of that TEDx talk is actually a really good place to start. So there's 3 main products on my website, right? There's the Ritual for Divorce. There's the My Lawyer Free Divorce course. There is also a How Do I Tell My Spouse I Want a Divorce and Keep the Peace ebook. And so they're for different parts in the process. And then there's the whole mediation service. And if you click on it, that's where you can actually book a free call for 20 minutes to help you get clear. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all at kimkorven.com. So KIMKOR, V as in Victor, EN.com. And yeah. Like if you're thinking about it, that script, the ebook is actually pure gold. Some women who've bought it, they haven't really needed anybody else. Right? They go to an attorney with their spouse and they figure it out together.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing. So yes, we will have Kim's website in the show notes. So that you can find it. And I will I'll go out and look for a link to the TEDx that we can put in the show notes too, to make it easy for people to find. But please, reach out to Kim, whether it's to have that 20-minute conversation and see where things go from there, or to access some of these resources. And this podcast, of course, you can find it on all podcast platforms, but it will show up in the next week or so on my YouTube channel as well. So if you want to watch the video of our conversation, we would love to have you do that. But as I wind this down, I just want to say, whether you're rebuilding after divorce or just trying to find more balance in your life, the goal is the same. Protect your peace, protect your plan, and protect your future. So if today's conversation is causing you to look at things a little differently, to want to navigate things a little differently, or somebody who may be facing divorce or who is going through it right now that could utilize this episode or these resources, please share this episode with them. And of course, if you want more of my content, I am going to have a blog format from this podcast, and I'll link some of Kim's her website and the TEDx in that as well. But you can always follow me on Substack for more of all of my content and information, because I can never pack it all into an episode. But you can find that additional content there on Substack under Chat with Nat as well. And I want to thank you all for joining us, for listening to this week's episode. And until next time, remember to focus on your 5 F's: faith, family, finance, fitness, and fun. And as always, make sure that you're making time for joy. We'll see you again next week.